I now call to order the January 15, 2025 meeting of the Legislative and Governmental Relations Committee of the Board of Education of Baltimore County. In accordance with Board Policy 8311, the chair of a committee, at their discretion and after consultation with the staff liaison, may convene an in-person committee meeting. Otherwise, all committee meetings will be held electronically. Today's meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through Microsoft Teams. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, committee members will state their name before speaking. Ms. Seabolt, please call the roll of board members to determine the presence of a quorum of the committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Chike-Kalu?
Present.
Ms. Dominowski?
Here.
Ms. Henn? Ms. Lichter?
Present.
Ms. Pumphrey?
Present.
Ms. Booker-Dwyer?
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have quorum. Ms. Seabolt, please call the roll of staff members on the Legislative and Governmental Relations Committee participating in today's meeting.
Ms. Charlie Green?
Present.
Mr. Bazemore?
Present.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide. So welcome committee members and staff. We are excited to have our second committee meeting of this legislative session. You can go to the next slide. And I always just like to ground us in the purpose of this committee, and just in case there's anyone who is just tuning in for the very first time to this legislative committee meeting, our purpose is to review legislation that could impact the board and the school system, and to work to develop legislative priorities that we will recommend for the board approval. And our measures of effectiveness are listed on the slide. Next slide. And so for this meeting, our overarching meeting outcomes is we're going to start by going over a high-level overview of the different priorities, platforms, agendas, recommendations from some of the state-level organizations. Everyone now has come out with something stating what they prioritize this legislative session. And so I thought it was important for us to have that background context as we move into that second bullet point, where we will begin to really dig deep into what we want our draft legislative priorities to be. And so what we will do for that part of the meeting is there's some draft legislative priorities that were created from the brainstorm that we did at the last meeting. And the goal is to go through those priorities. We're going to edit them. We're going to tear them apart, put them together, get something that we feel comfortable with taking to the board or not. So we're going to really have a working meeting today to go through those priorities and get something that we want, or come back to another meeting and continue to work through them. We're going to discuss some of the pre-filed bills, and then talk about future agenda items. So if there's any bills that you want to go in deeper, we can do that, put that on a future agenda item. Or as we're going over these high-level reviews of some of these legislative platforms from these state-level organizations, we can come back and go into some deeper detail with them. And so we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bazemore. And before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to highlight to board members that when you go to board docs, there's links to several documents in board docs. So you have the MABE, the link to the legislative priorities for MABE. You have the Maryland State Board Platform link. You have the Maryland State Education Association's legislative agenda. You have the 2025 issues paper, and then you have PAZAM's policy recommendations. And so, Mr. Bazemore, he's going to go in detail with into MABE and the state board platform and give us a high-level overview of the other documents. But I figured just in case you wanted to do some deeper reading over, before our next meeting, and you wanted to go through that 200-page 2025 issues paper, you can dig deeper into that. The PZAM policy recommendations, they have some really, really good, they highlight what's working well with the blueprint, some things that we can modify with the blueprint. So this is some really good things to read just to kind of paint that foundational education context as we enter that legislative session. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Bazemore, to take us through some of these documents.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening to you and all the legislative members here, the board members that are here. Looking forward to working with each and every one of you this legislative session. Thank you for that update, Madam Chair, because I really want to highlight that the links that we have posted is a wealth of information that you can get on the PZAM, on their policy recommendations. You can go to MSDE as well. They have their legislative principles. And of course, MABE. MABE will have their draft legislative priorities up as well. And in looking at all these documents, what I tried to do was look at some common themes that were going through them to help, guide us on our draft priorities. And so I just wanted to kind of outline from a high level overview, MABE's priorities and PZAM's and MSDE and see where they cross reference. And I think everyone basically is on the same page this year. I mean, everything is centered around the budget and the structural deficit at the state and how that's going to impact everyone. If you look at the draft MABE legislative priorities, priority one is governance authority for local boards of education to adopt policies that reflect local priorities and assets. And that's basically saying flexibility. As you all know, more than most, that you are elected and appointed board members, and you want to make sure that you have as much flexibility as you possibly can to make decisions about your local school system. So that's one of our priorities that I think we're going to look at. It certainly is one of PZAM's and MSDE, maintaining that local kind of autonomy so that the people closest to the work can make decisions is very, very important to MABE. Priority number two is sustained and increased local government investments in education, which, is front and center with the blueprint funding and being funded, and we get our funding as we all know from the state and the county. So in a lot of ways, we want our priority to be that we maintain that maintenance of effort requirement that's in the one of the requirements, which guarantees that local funding must be equal or greater to the previous year's per pupil funding. That's important for all of us to do the work that we're doing, is to advocate for proper funding so that we can continue to work. Priority number three for MABE is sustained and increased state funding for school construction and renovation, which we also in Baltimore County Public Schools, the superintendent always reminds us that we have the third oldest inventory of school buildings in the state. And so we are very aggressive at getting funding to renovate schools, to build new schools that address our overcrowding capacities and just have 21st century learning environments. And we've been doing really well in that area, and we want to sustain that because that's critical, especially now with pre-K and the expansion of pre-K and needing more space. So we want to maintain that school construction and renovation of funding. And lastly, MABE draft priority is sustaining the blueprint for Maryland's future. Again, one of the main things that we're hearing from the superintendents, from the board members around the state is having more flexibility for the locals, which is you, the ones, that are here now, board members, where you can have some level of flexibility with the funding that they're providing to the locals. Some of it is kind of dedicated and prescribed. And what a lot of locals are and MABE is saying is that we want the funding, but we, just give us a little bit more flexibility in how to use it, so we can use that. If you don't need it here, we could move it there instead of it being locked in. And so that's one of the main priorities of MABE as well, and PZAM. That's kind of a high level view. And again, using those links that Madam Chair provided, you can actually read the documents in full and get a little bit more into the weeds. I think that's it, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I wanted to pause here to see if there's any questions. I know that you all, the links are posted here, and we can, I do want to give you all time to dig deep into these documents, because some of them are quite long. And so if we need to circle back around to any of these for our February meeting, we definitely can. But we'll pause here on the MAID document at least, because we work very closely with MAID. And are there any questions, anything you want to dig deeper into with the MAID legislative priorities? Okay, so last time with MAID legislative priorities, we included them as a part of our legislative priorities. We had a statement that said that, we agree, something to this extent of like, we agree with MAID, or we support MAID's legislative priorities, and then we had our own priorities. And so that's just something to think about if we wanted to take that approach this time, if we wanted to include a statement like that as we draft our priorities, or if we just want to have our own separate priorities. So that's just something to think about as we then move forward to go to our priorities then. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, so we've done that. So our draft priorities. So these, the 2025 draft legislative priorities, they were informed by our collective brainstorming that we did at the last committee meeting, and shaped by some of these statewide platforms that MAID one that we just reviewed. And these priorities are draft. So the idea is that we're going to spend some time today to go through each one of these and to get something that that we all feel comfortable with. So I just want to really reiterate that this is draft. The whole purpose is for us to have a discussion about this today. And just to remind everyone that our priorities, they really do help to inform which bills that if we decide as a board to take some type of action on, such as sharing testimony or coming out with some type of statement for or against. So they really help to shape that. So the idea is that we're going to have a discussion about these today, make some additional modifications, and then we'll decide, do we advance the draft, the modified priorities onto the full board for approval. So the four priorities that are listed here, the first one around board governance, just supporting, maintaining, and strengthening local board governance. So not taking any of the authority away from the work of a local board. The second priority is around Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And this is where we're really trying to incorporate, Ms. Dominowski, last time you were talking about emphasizing student achievement and something around that. Ms. Lichter, you talked a little bit about budgeting and brought up some of the things with the blueprint. So this was, so we tried to put it all together in items kind of 2, 3, and 4. And so with the blueprint, emphasizing that we support it and that, we just want that we want local school board members at the table to make, if there's adjustments that are needed, that's informed by data around how it's been implemented thus far and student achievement, as well as the experience of educators. So really having input from local school board members on any adjustments that are made moving forward. Around the budget, ensuring that that effective services in the school systems are fully funded and preserved, and that that school system leadership and looking at leadership as a whole. So the board, the superintendents, that we have that budget flexibility required to meet the needs of the students and build on the strengths of the school system, and then educator workloads. Any legislation that's going to increase that results in larger class sizes, additional reporting requirements, or mandates that do not directly contribute to improved student outcomes is something that, as a board, we would not be for. And so I want to pause here, give you all time to react if you want to. So please raise your hand, or you can put something in the chat so that we can begin to make some modifications. All right, I'll start with Ms. Hinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we feel that these priorities capture our goal of safe and healthy school facilities for our students? I know that that is one of the board's as well as superintendent's priorities. And in the past, we have combined those two. While they may be separate goals in and of themselves, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of those as priorities. And I'm glad to see that facilities are still, and capital improvements are still listed as MABE's priority, because that continued investment at the state level and at the local level is so very critical. I want to ensure that our priorities reinforce that priority of MABE's, that continued investment, as well as the board's governance and the board's autonomy in determining those capital improvement priorities. So when I was looking just briefly at MABE's priorities, I thought, I'd almost like to combine a couple of those in terms of that. But without getting into that and focusing on our legislative priorities, I would almost like to add something along the lines of safe and healthy school facilities. Both the safety of our students as well as the health of our facilities, focusing on the safety initiatives that the superintendent is also focused on, as well as the health of our facilities, and continuing to make those investments in the improvements and replacement, expansion, all of the wonderful capital projects that we have underway, and the continued investment in. And I know, again, I'm pleased to see that the state has supported us in that. I know that as funds become available, there's continued efforts to try to make those available to the school construction program. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
No, that is great. Do you have language specifically that you would like to see? So I was taking some notes, like the safe and healthy school facilities, focusing on continuing to make improvements, continuing those investments. Do you have like specific language that you want to see, or do you want us to put, so this kind of gets back to like that MABE's language, that we are in support of, that should we just use MABE's and like go back to, we support everything that MABE is saying? Or do we want to craft our own? So what would you prefer?
Sure. I would probably look at our prior year's legislative priorities as a starting point to see if there's language in there that we like, and revisit that. And if we plan to revisit these at the next meeting, maybe we can review those prior versions in the meantime and use that as a starting point. That's where I suggest we start, is rather than from a blank slate.
We did review it at the last meeting. I know you were not able to attend that last meeting, because at the last meeting we reviewed it because it was reducing class size, expanding out of school time learning, and innovative school schedules were our last priorities. So we did not have anything, because we had the statement in there about the priorities of academic achievement, safety and climate, infrastructure, and the recruitment and retention of highly effective teachers, leaders, and staff. So that was like an overarching opening statement, and that we support the legislative priorities of MABE. And so that was kind of was like the catch-all, and then we put in what was unique about us. So it was like we support everything that MABE is doing, and then the three things that are different from what MABE had is what we emphasized in our priorities. So we could take that approach again, where we say, okay, yeah, we like everything in MABE, so we're going to double down on that. And then what makes us, what we're going to add to that, because like MABE, they don't address educator workloads. So that would be something different that we would do.
Sure.
So
It may have been in a prior version then, and I appreciate you sharing the process and what was accomplished at the last meeting. And then maybe two versions ago, I remember the two items, because they were discussed in parallel, were the emphasis on blueprint, as well as the focus on facilities. And these were the two priorities, or the two hot items being discussed by the General Assembly at the time, which is why I remember that as we were discussing our legislative priorities, they paralleled the conversation. And Mr. Bazemore may recall these conversations, why we specifically included them within our legislative priorities, because we wanted to ensure that specifically funding was available for both. And this was along from a timeline perspective, the Built to Learn legislation was underway. Discussions were involving that. This was before Blueprint passed. So they were happening in parallel. And the board wanted to emphasize the fact that, hey, this isn't one or the other. We need to do both. So when I look at this and I see one, I'm like, hey, let's hold up and make sure we include both as priorities, so that we're not excluding our facilities needs, because we know with our aging schools, we absolutely still have unmet facilities needs. So hopefully that helps ensure that we're not leaving our facilities needs out.
thank you.
And I'm happy to draft something if that would be helpful.
Yep, that will be helpful. Yep, if you could send just a sentence or two, that'll be helpful. Yep.
Will do.
Thanks. Anyone else? Additional modifications or edits? Oh, you think these are perfect? We don't need any modifications? Ms. Pumphrey.
I don't have a specific modification, but I have some thoughts. I'm just thinking, looking at one, that it's very broad, which may be fine. But we were discussing how we may, refer to MABE's priorities as also our priorities. And I think that fits under MABE's priorities. And again, I'm not making any suggestions. I'm more opening this up for, trying to discuss this. Just seems so broad to me. I'm not sure if it should stay like that, or if we maybe don't need it there because it's covered under MABE. Just thinking out loud.
This is Ms. Lichter. Ms. Pumphrey, which one were you referring to? The first one?
Yeah, the board governance.
Okay. Yeah, because
I
I was
think
thinking, do we add by, we support maintaining and strengthening local board governance through MABE priorities, or, or
I
do
just
you
think,
mean-
was it not, I don't know if it was MABE priority number 1 that addressed this. Can't recall now. I can try to
Have
pull
to
up
go
on my
back,
screen.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's MABE priority number 1. And so what I'm hearing then, maybe as we craft our official document, we could have some language up top that says, we can pull over some of the language that we used before. And that we're committed to the school system's priorities. I'm going to cut and paste. And I'll read it out loud as well. So what I put into the chat was the language that we used as the opening paragraph for our last year's legislative priorities. And I'll read it out loud. The Baltimore County Board of Education is committed to the school system's priorities of academic achievement, safety and climate, infrastructure, and the recruitment and retention of highly effective teachers, leaders, and staff. Correspondingly, the board supports the 2024 legislative priorities of the Maryland Association of Board of Educations and other efforts that align with system priorities, improve student outcomes, maintain local board governance, and provide equitable funding for school systems. The board does not support unfunded mandates. This document highlights strategies the board believes will improve teaching and learning and expand college and career success. So we could tweak that opening some, because as I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, we could make some modifications to that, and lead with that again, and then that would take out this number one piece. And then what we can do is focus on maybe 2, 3, 4, and then Ms. Hen add in the safe and healthy school facilities. So it'll be the 4 priorities: blueprint, budgets, educator workload, safe and healthy school facilities. What do you all think about that approach?
I like that. Also for oh, sorry, I should have raised my hand. Also for number 2 for blueprint, I like how this is. I do want to make sure, which I think this does do that. I want to make sure that we are, I feel like blueprint is being named as the fault for everything wrong with the budget for the state. And I want to make sure that we are continue to support the blueprint implementation, but just with some flexibility as far as our individual school system, and other people I'm sure have the same idea. And I think we do fulfill that here.
And I think what we can do is we can like underline or highlight, like, we support the continued implementation. And we maybe even can highlight, because Baltimore County, I think we're doing well. We have some things that we've really done well with Blueprint. So we don't want to stop the progress. So I think that's a great catch, Ms. Pumphrey, to really emphasize.
That's exactly what I was getting at, because I think some things we're ahead of the game, and I think that's, we should be proud of that and highlight, we should make sure we can do this. It just, maybe a little bit of flexibility is what we're asking for.
We just need a little more flexibility, a little more time, a little more money. Yeah. Ms. Pumphrey, you're finished?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dominowski, and then I'll go to Ms. Lichter.
So the only thing I hear we're saying about the blueprint and asking for more flexibility, and I know we're not the only board that is asking for that. I'm kind of worried that that was the point of the blueprint, was to allocate and make sure the money was spent in a certain way. So if we're asking for flexibility, wouldn't that go against what the blueprint is intended for?
And so, Ms. Dominowski, you are partially correct. So if the intent was that money was allocated to do certain things, but what we know with implementation science is that you learn as you're implementing, and you course correct and you make adjustments. And so we're 3 or almost 4 years into blueprint implementation, and this is really the time to look to see, okay, because you have this idea, you make a plan, and we all know that plans don't always go as intended. And so this is a good time to really reflect on what has worked well and where can we course correct. And that's the intent of item 2. It's not to stop the progress or anything like that. It's just to be reflective and to follow good implementation science, to say, this is yielding returns on investment, and this isn't necessarily doing what was intended the way that it was intended. And maybe we could make some tweaks to get at the original intent of what it wanted to do, because context matters. And so we know that what is going to work well in Baltimore County may not necessarily work well in Worcester County. So we need that, so that flexibility across the state is needed.
So I think this is kind of where my idea of, not instead of just being so focused on implementing and targeting money to a certain aspect of education, and that's what it's for, but like if we're getting the return on investment, as in we're getting the improvements in student outcomes, then that's where we should be directing the money, and that's what it should be tied to, not to just actually implementing something for the sake of implementing it. That's what I'm, that's right. Does that, you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't, like, I don't like that either. I think that if we're gonna, if you're gonna give us money and we need to put it in something, but it's not actually improving the outcomes for our students, then I don't want it, and I want to put it somewhere else. So how do we check and balance that?
I agree with you there. So I was trying to get at that here, like these adjustments must be informed by data on implementation and student achievement. So do you have additional language or things that could be modified to make that stronger? Because I agree with you, like if it's not working for the students, then we need to stop it. So if you have any other language that you can suggest there, let me know and we can put that in.
Okay, I'll think about it. Thanks.
Okay, yep. Ms. Lichter?
Mine is kind of on the same lines as Ms. Dominowski, that same number 2. I know that Dr. Rogers, I think, is part of the superintendent's group that have submitted suggestions for the blueprint modifications. And do we want to look at the wording that they used and try to parallel it if we agree?
Yes, and they used a lot of words.
Right, but like the gist of, I mean, I don't know if the word flexibility was used, because I agree that that word is getting thrown around so much, and I'm not sure it really conveys the changes that they want. And I haven't seen it. I just know that there's a group of superintendents that did send something, and we just want to look at the content of their request.
Yes. So that is, yeah, so we'll take a deeper look at what they did. That is included in the link, in one of the links. And so it's on that link that I just put in there on page 10.
Okay,
They have a whole section on the greater flexibility in budgeting.
okay, great. I'll
So,
take a look at it. Thank you.
yeah, but if there's anything in there that we should put in there, just let me know and we can do that.
Okay.
And Miss Hen, I see that you have put a lot in the chat. So do you want to explain what
Sure.
lot of information?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I located, it may not be the most recent version, but it's our 2021 legislative priorities. And there are 2 separate ones, one for school safety and security, the other for facilities funding. They both need to be updated. They are very dated in terms of the legislation that was being considered at the time. However, they hit on the main points so that we can see what the purpose of both of those priorities was at the time. And then the third comment I added or put in the chat was the link just to that document. So you can take a look at the whole document itself. And it's much more detailed. Again, it's dated. It goes into the specifics that were being considered, mostly at the state level, although there's some local details in there as well. But I think it gives us a starting point that we can trim down to come up with a more generic, lasting statement for our
So
purposes.
this is helpful. So if you could just create that statement and send it to me, that'll be great, and we can build that right into this document. So around that safe and healthy school facilities. Because I know we want to keep this concise. We know that it's, when you start to get over a page or 2, people don't read it. So we want to make sure that it's nice and concise, and it just gets right to the heart of what we want our elected officials and our community members to know.
Sure. Do we want, and looking at this, it may be worth a brief discussion or consideration of whether these should be separate priorities, looking at some of the detail that's provided here. My memory did not serve me well on this point. I had remembered them being one priority, and we had broken them out as separate priorities, one for facilities funding, the other for safety and security. And I would love to get the committee's thoughts on whether they should be broken out as separate priorities or not, and get the group's thoughts on that before drafting that for review. What a
I think they could be two priorities, depending on what the the content is. But if you're talking about like safety, as far as like the Omni Alert and like the safety, all the safety things that we're doing to keep students safe, and then with the facilities, talking about the infrastructure of the facilities, and like that's what you're in the capital investments, like that's what you're talking about.
yes,
Yes, so they are two separate things.
I
That's the
I
way I
agree.
see it.
Very good.
I had one quick question for Ms. Hen's revision. So when she said under the guise of safety, if we're making that a new priority area, can we not just constrict it to like physical safety, like looking at just safety in a more general aspect? So maybe like even student well-being or just the learning experience and the climate of safety within the classroom, within educational sense, rather than just physical safety and harm.
Love
Madam
that.
Chair, may I respond with some thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Ms.
Thank
Handy.
you. That is so important. I really appreciate the question. And I'm perhaps someone more familiar with Blueprint could speak to the requirements covered under Blueprint. My initial reaction is that Blueprint has requirements in terms of staffing with specific individuals responsible for school climate and that aspect of safety. However, that is important. When I think of school climate, I think Blueprint in terms of legislation that addresses those needs versus physical safety and infrastructure, which is addressed by the facilities funding and the capital funding. But that's how my brain works when I see these, and that's how I differentiate the two. But if we want to specifically call out school climate somewhere else, I think it's just as, if not more important. But I think it does fall under Blueprint in terms of how we're addressing it and where the funding source is to address it.
I think while it does link to Blueprint, I think often when we're looking at Blueprint, I think we're looking still at that ultimate vision. So if we're still making that clear, I guess, separation, or we're clearly distinguishing safety, I think just to kind of kill multiple birds with one stone, it would also be beneficial for us to broaden that definition of safety if we're looking at not just, again, physical safety, such as Omni Alert, but also just social emotional safety, and then safety within the classroom culture. And I get where you're saying with Blueprint, but I think it would still just be beneficial so that way our priorities encompass that.
And so I agree. So Miss Chika Kulu, do you want to take a try at writing kind of one that a safety priority that speaks to what you're talking about?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Any other comments about what needs to happen with these priorities? Okay, then as action items, I have Ms. Hen is going to wordsmith and come up with something around safety and facilities, two separate priorities. Ms. Dominowski is going to look more into student achievement around that item number 2 for Blueprint for Maryland's future, to see if we can get that language a little bit more robust, to really emphasize that, we're not just, the change is going to be focused on student achievement, Ms. Lichter is going to look to see how we can strengthen that alignment to PZAM's language, especially with that budget flexibility. So for that item 3, Ms. Chika Kalu is going to look at that overall well-being and safety from that more holistic lens and come up with a legislative priority for that. And we can just have that as a separate item. And so by January 31st, does everyone think they could have their draft language to me by then? Is that enough time? And we could, that'll give time for the staff to kind of create one document that we could put everything together and get something up in board docs in enough time. I got a yes
for
from
me.
Ms. Romanowski, a yes from Ms. Chikakulu,
Yes, for Ms. Lichter.
yes from Ms. Lichter, okay. Yes from Ms. Hen. Okay. Ms. Pumphrey, January. Well, Ms. Pumphrey doesn't have any assignments, so it's good for her. Okay, so so if January 31st, you could send me that. Now we have our next meeting is February 19th, and now we're well into the legislative session by then. And so we could come back to this February 19th, work it out, and then there's a board meeting February 25th, and try to see if we could get it on the board agenda for that. It's a quick turnaround. Ms. Lichter, is that possible?
Sure. Tell me the date that you just said for the board meeting one.
February 25th. If we come to an agreement at our February 19th
Right. Okay.
meeting, then we would advance it to the full board for review at
Okay.
that February 25th.
And that's an open session, correct? Do we
An open
preview?
session.
Right.
Yep.
Do we preview it and close, or just do the whole thing in open?
Do it all in open.
Okay.
But then if we don't like it, then take it off the 25th agenda. So no, I think it'll be fine. I think we'll have something
Okay.
to react to. I think it'll be good.
Okay, I will let them know to put that on the agenda.
Okay, so what we'll do is January 31st, if you all get your draft items to me, and then I'll work with Mr. Bazemore and staff, and they'll pull it all together in a document, and that'll give us something to react to. We'll make sure that it gets up on board docs in enough time where you can have enough time to review it, and by then you would have read through all of the PZAM documents, the MSEA documents, the issues paper. You would have had all that background. I mean, you could further tweak things. And so we'll come to the February 19th meeting all ready to go. Hey. All right, well, we'll go on to the next item on the, so any other questions about the legislative priorities before we start talking about some of these pre-filed bills? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bazemore. He's going to take us through some of these bills that are underway.
Thank
Oh, Mr. Bazemore, you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, the last few years in the state legislature, a lot of the senators and delegates have been pre-filing bills at the request of the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. Last year, we had an unprecedented amount of pre-filed bills. This year, we have over 60. Last year, we had over 400 bills, education bills that we were tracking and following. This year, I think we'll probably get close to that as well. And there's usually thousands of bills that are filed during the legislative session. So right now we have over 60 pre-filed bills. However, usually in February, the last part of January, definitely in February, is when we'll see the bulk of the bills being filed because there's some um, timelines that the legislators have to meet to get their bills in to be heard during the session. And those dates are in February. So I just wanted to say that to the committee that the next few weeks we'll be seeing a lot of bills that are drafted and filed. But what we wanted to do with the pre-filed bills is obviously we can't go over each one of them. We'll be tracking all of them and keeping up with them. We just pulled 6 or 7 bills that were pre-filed and just wanted to kind of give you a sample and an idea of some of the bills that we feel you may be interested in. And if you are interested in in any particular bill, these or any others that are filed, we can follow up. You can contact me and we can follow up on how you can get involved individually. And then as our committee member as well. So the first sample bill that we have is House Bill 38. Delegate Moon filed this bill. It's a school, because I know we're interested in school construction and adequate public facilities ordinances, because we just went through that whole process with the county council. We do have a local APFO. So and Madam Julie Henn was actually on that committee. So this bill by Delegate Moon is a school construction and housing, school zones and adequate public facilities ordinance. It's requiring each school board of education to submit a report to the Department of Planning and the Interagency Commission on School Construction each year, repealing the authority of the Interagency Commission on School Construction to make an enrollment deduction under certain circumstances, and it prohibits a county's APFO ordinance from restricting housing development after a certain period of time. And as it relates to school zone, school construction, and the APFO. This bill has been filed. We'll monitor this bill. We'll let you know when the hearings are for this bill. It doesn't have a cross file on the Senate side, but I thought this was one that we will be, kind of highlighting and keeping an eye on as it makes its way through. The second bill is House Bill 57. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo filed this bill, and it's the County Board of Education Student Cellular Phone Use Policy Establishment Bill. Again, this bill is requiring each county board of education to develop and implement a policy limiting the use of a cellular phone by a student during the school day. And it says that each county board shall develop and implement a policy to limit the use of cellular phones by students during instructional time. And each of you know that we've locally have done a lot of work in this area and will continue to work in this area. But I thought it would be good to highlight this one and keep you informed on how this bill is making its way through the state legislature this year. A lot of other local jurisdictions have cell phone policies that they're working on as well. So we'll monitor that one. Our third bill that we pulled is filed by Delegate Mangione. This is House Bill 68. This bill is a public schools children suspected of a crime of violence prohibition on in-person attendance. It's called the Student Protection Act of 2025. This bill would prohibit a child from in-person attendance at a public school if the child has been identified as a suspect for certain offenses. If the child has been identified by law enforcement as a suspect in a crime of violence, The child is prohibited from in-person attendance at a public school until the investigation is complete and the child is no longer identified as a suspect. This is House Bill 68. We'll definitely be following this bill as well this year. And that's a local delegate. Delegate Mangione will file that one. We have another bill filed by Delegate Mangione, House Bill 137. This is children charged with a crime of violence, prohibition on in-person attendance. Different than the bill we just went through, which basically says a child that is a suspect be prohibited from in-person learning. This one actually says, for the purpose of prohibiting a child from in-person attendance at a public school if the child has been charged with a crime of violence. So I just wanted to highlight that and make that distinction. And again, it prohibits in-person attendance to a public school until the child is found not delinquent or not guilty of the charge, or the charges are dismissed. House Bill 192, Delegate Mangione has filed this one as well. And this is House Bill 192. It's the County Boards of Education Student Cellular Phone Use Policy Establishment. It's the No Distracted Learning Act, is what he's calling it. And this is requiring local school boards of education to adopt a policy that prohibits, in the previous bill that was filed, it said limit the use of. But this bill is actually saying to prohibit students from using a cellular phone during certain school hours. And each county board shall adopt a policy prohibiting students from using a cellular phone during school hours. We'll definitely be following these cell phone bills. This is House Bill 192. And let's see, the last two, House Bill 197 is filed by Delegate Pasteur, former board member. And I think it's cross-filed, if I'm not mistaken, by Senator Ben Brooks of Baltimore County. This is the Public Schools Restorative Practice Schools Comprehensive Plan. This bill would require the State Department of Education, and I just want to underline that, it requires the State Department of Education to develop a comprehensive plan to implement requirements for the establishment of restorative practices schools, requiring a county board of education to use the comprehensive plan if the county board chooses to establish, and I want to highlight, if the county board chooses to establish a restorative practice school. This bill will emphasize building strong relationships and setting clear behavioral expectations that contribute to the well-being of the school community. The state will provide or establish guidelines that define a state code of discipline for all public schools with standards of conduct and consequences for violations of the standards. And again, this is House Bill 197. Delegate Cheryl Pasteur has filed that bill. And our last bill that we pulled, again, is Delegate Mangione. He's got a lot of bills in this year. House Bill 200. And this one, I thought it would be just FYI for us, because we've done a lot around in the board and the superintendent. You guys have done a lot around school bus safety, and a lot of investment in that and policy to keep our children safe. So this is a bill by Mangione that is called the Work Group to Study School Bus Safety, Maryland School Bus Safety Act of 2025. And again, it's the establishment of a work group that shall study and identify issues related to safety for the behavior of students and bus drivers on buses driven to and from a primary or secondary school in the state. And again, we'll monitor and track this one. I know there's a lot of interest in school bus safety, so this is kind of an FYI bill that I just wanted to make you aware of. that if it passes, they will set up a work group to study, further study school bus safety. So that's the bills we pulled. There are many other bills that we'll be tracking. I just wanted to say that we work very closely with MAVE. MAVE does an excellent job representing local school districts. We all try to work in concert with the other school districts because there's strength in numbers. And we'll continue to monitor all of the bills, education bills that come forward. And if you have an interest in one of them as an individual board member, reach out to me. But certainly as a committee here, we will choose those bills that we want to weigh in on as the session moves forward. So with that, Madam Chair, any questions or?
Yep. So I'll open up the
Explanations?
floor for discussion on any of these bills. So you just raise your hand and we'll start with Ms. Hen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Mr. Bazemore.
Good evening.
Do you know if any bills have been filed to address the change in county council members regarding the board composition, or to address the any changes to the board to reflect the change in county council members
I
in
haven't
terms of our composition?
right.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I haven't seen a bill yet, but I'm keeping my eyes and ears open because I know there will be a bill that comes forth to address that because the county council, in their legislation and we all know that it passed on the ballot at the last election that the county council is going to expand to 9. And so I know there'll be a bill dropped on that. It wasn't pre-filed, but I'm pretty sure there will be a bill, and I will make sure that that bill comes to our committee as soon as it's dropped.
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Bazemore, this
Senate-
is Ms.
Senate-
Lichter.
Oh,
Ms. Hen, they
is
spoke
this-
to me about this briefly on Saturday, a couple of the legislators about their thoughts. So they are going to try to reach out to us. Senator Sidnor, I think, is the one that may be taking the lead on it. And he said that right now his idea is to have schoolmatic districts, instead of trying to add more, like they're adding more to the councilmatic districts, that they keep the current districts that we represent as school, I think I made up that word, but school districts for the purpose of board members, and that they would reevaluate it every certain amount of years. So, but he just said that to me in passing, but he did say that they would reach out to us before anything was decided.
Thank you, Ms. Lichter. So we would have our own set of districts independent of the council?
Correct.
If that would pass?
If he takes his idea to what he told me, yes, then he was thinking instead of trying to add to or redo at this point, but then he would put in a clause, something about in, I don't know, X amount of years, they would reevaluate or relook at the districts. But again, it was just Saturday at the TAPCO breakfast, but I just wanted you to know that they do realize that they should get some input from us before going forward.
Then each council district would not have board representation as it does now.
Or it
Is
could
that
have
the
double,
understanding?
right? Or it could have
Or
double,
could
like,
have double.
right,
Mm.
overlap. So again, we need to see what he's saying
Yes.
fleshed out. I just wanted you to know that they do realize that they should try to get our input sooner than afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
No, that was great information, Chair Lichter. That was great. And we'll follow that. I know that's a priority for all of you, all of us. So we'll make sure we follow that. When that bill drops, we'll get that to you immediately.
Yes. Ms. Pumphrey?
Sorry, looks like I'm still muted. I know that you mentioned, Mr. Bazemore, that you're going to be following other bills, but I wanted to specifically mention one that was brought up yesterday during public session. And that was the a bill about the school start times. And I know that is supposed to be introduced by Delegate April Miller and Senator Mary Washington. So I just wanted to bring that to attention simply because it was mentioned yesterday in public comment by our PTA representatives.
start times? Okay,
Yes.
and
Yes.
Senator Washington?
Delegate April Miller and Senator Mary Washington are the
Okay,
sponsors.
okay, I'll keep an eye on that as well. Excellent. Okay.
And Mr. Bazemore, wasn't the school start times, didn't that bill come up before?
Yeah, I believe it did, and it didn't pass last year. And I think, I'm trying to remember, and I'll go back and do the research. I thought it was Anne Arundel County that we're looking at that locally, but I'll do some research and look at that. But if my memory serves me right, I think that bill was introduced, but I don't think it was passed last year.
Yeah, so let's stay on top of that because I know we have the orange ribbon schools where if you have the healthy start time, your school can get like some type of orange ribbon or something like that. But yeah, let's if whenever that bill comes up, let's put it on the list of bills to review and discuss.
Okay, great, great. Excellent.
Any other discussions? So we know the school start time will add to our list of bills to discuss. We'll add the bill about the composition of school board whenever that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Any other bills that any of the other pre-filed bills that you all want to discuss, or any other bills that you know or you're wondering that may come up that you want Mr. Bazemore to keep an eye out for?
Yes, Ms. Shigekalu, there was one bill that was filed by Delegate Vogel. It was House Bill 52, and it was the Your Voice, Your Act bill, which would lower the voting age for Board of Education elections to 16 rather than being 18. And I think it was pre-filed, so it's in the first committee, I think.
And that's HB 52.
Yeah.
Miss,
Yes.
okay. I think I saw that one. We'll track that and keep an eye on that too, as well. Okay.
All right.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Stay on top of that one. Any other bills? And I know that maybe they're going to have their link of all the bills in their tracker, and we'll make sure we'll share that link when it goes public with you all, so that you can also track where the education bills are, and if there's one that comes up that you want to discuss during committee meeting, we can just let us know and we will address. Okay. Well, we will move on then to the next item on the agenda. So the next item on the agenda is discussion of future meeting agenda topics. So the bills that you all have identified, that will be on, if they're out before February 19th, we will make sure that they are a part of the agenda topic, or make sure that they're on the agenda. If there's any other bills that come out before February 19th that you would like to discuss at the committee meeting, we can just let us know. We'll make sure that it is on the agenda. We will have Mr. Bazemore, again, at every meeting, kind of pull out some of the hot topic bills for us to review and discuss. At the February 19th meeting, we will review, we'll get the updated, prior to February 19th, you'll have the updated legislative priorities. We'll use that February 19th meeting to really revise those priorities, to get them in good shape to advance to the full board, hopefully by at the February 25th board meeting. Are there any other topics that you want addressed at the February 19th board, at the February 19th legislative committee meeting? If you think of any, let me know by February 7th at the latest, and we'll make sure we get it on the agenda. The last item on the agenda is announcements. The next Legislative and Governmental Relations Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 19, 2025 at 4:30 p.m. Is there any further business? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.